Wolfman's got nards. Let me do that again.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Wolfman's got nards. I hope that...
What's up, watchers? In today's episode, we will explore what happens when a group of ordinary kids take on the greatest supergroup of classic movie monsters the world has ever seen.
And there's nothing quite like putting the fate of the world in the grubby hands of prepubescent children.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, go load yourselves up on Twinkies and soda, because it's time for the 1987 cult classic, The Monster Squad. Welcome to the Midnight Watch Podcast, the show where we discuss classic cult and modern classic movies.
We're your hosts, Josh and Jeremy, and we try to review movies that are at least 10 years old and see what kind of impact they made or are still making on culture and the film industry. We are heavy on spoilers here, so if that's not for you, go ahead and pause this, watch the movie, and then finish the episode.
We rate these movies in 4 categories. Number 1, the level of impact and success it had when it was released. Number 2, how relevant is it today? Number 3, our own personal enjoyment of this movie. And number 4, is it a midnight watch?
All right, I'm going to go ahead and jump the gun and say it, but this is such a fun movie. It's truly a little-known gem, at least on the mainstream, I think. But before I go on and on about how much people need to see this movie, can you give us some quick facts to get the ball rolling?
Yes, quick facts 101. Let's see here. It was directed by Fred Decker, who isn't really known by anything except for his other cult classic movie, Night of the Creeps. Have you ever seen that?
I haven't. I know what it is, but that's the one I missed.
Well, that movie came out before this, and there's a cool thing, like in one scene when the mutant slugs or whatever are crawling across the bathroom, on the back you can see in graffiti somebody wrote The Monster Squad, so he like tagged something for his own next movie, which is pretty cool.
That is.
So he went to he went to the same college with Shane Black, actually. And so Shane Black and him wrote this story together. Shane Black has done all kinds of stuff. He wrote the screenplay for Lethal Weapon. He wrote and directed Iron Man 3. And then the awesome movie Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. He wrote and directed that.
I do like that movie.
Right. And then I think his newest movie was with Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe. And I'm totally just blanking on the nice guys.
Buddy.
Yeah, the nice
I say
guys.
that kind of buddy cop, but they're not buddy cops. They're
they hate
crooks,
each other.
I think, right? Or
no,
they hate each other?
No, they're cops, but that movie is actually really funny. Like it's
like
really
a love-hate kind of situation.
Right. So
like terrible Starsky and Hutch.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And then let's see here. So this movie, there's a lot of information about this movie. This is our first cult classic movie that is a legit cult classic. Like it bombed when it first came out.
Yeah.
It had a budget of $12 million and it made $3.8 million. So yeah, it died. It died hard. So,
right.
Yeah. And so with this though, they basically, a lot of people thought that it was a ripoff of the Goonies. Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Which is what I actually love about it. It's the Goonies, but with monsters. It's
right, like the classic. Hammerstein.
It's corny.
Movies.
It's corny, but I love it though. It's so good.
Right. And then let's see what else we got here. This movie was only in theaters for 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh!
Like that has nothing. That means like
they couldn't wait to get rid of it.
Yeah. It looks like basically. I mean, 3.8 million. So normally, I don't know how many theaters it got into. Probably like 1,200 theaters at least or something like that. So it made almost no money and then left. And then nobody basically, it became a really cult classic movie up until I think it was like 2010 or something when they released it on Blu-ray. It's like the special edition. And then that's when it kind of became more of a popular movie around Halloween. But before then, it was like all word of mouth, very cult classic type of stuff.
Right. And I'm sure the VHS floated around, but probably not much.
And so it's basically, one critic said that it was a bad version of Our Gang in a horror movie. So that's the Little Rascals. So that's pretty awesome. We have here starring, we've got Andre Gower, Ryan Lambert, Ashley Bank, Tom Noonan, Duncan Rager, Robbie Kiger. We have Brent Shalom, Michael Faustino, and Stephen Mach. I think that's how you say his name. So,
Or Mach.
yeah.
I don't know.
Mach. Okay.
I don't know.
Let's hear about that synopsis, Josh.
All right, so the breakdown of the plot, once again, comes from Wikipedia. The Monster Squad is a club of pre-teenagers who idolize classic monster movies and their non-human stars. They hold meetings at a treehouse in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Club leader Sean Crenshaw, whose younger sister Phoebe desperately wants to join the club, is given the diary of legendary monster hunter Dr. Abraham Van Helsing. But his excitement abates when he finds it is written in German. Sean and the rest of the Monster Squad, his best friend and second in command, Patrick Rhodes, clumsy overweight Horace, tough older kid Rudy, and little Eugene, go to visit an elderly man known as the Scary German Guy, who's actually a kind gentleman and a former concentration camp prisoner, and they get him to translate the diary. The diary describes in great detail an amulet that is composed of concentrated good. One day out of every century, as the forces of good and evil reach a balance, the otherwise indestructible amulet. Boy, you don't know this omelet. It is amazing.
I was gonna say,
it changes the balance of. That's it. I'm hungry. Okay, so the amulet becomes vulnerable to destruction. With the next day of balance happening within a few days, at the stroke of midnight, the kids realize they must gain possession of the amulet and use it with an incantation from Van Helsing's diary to open a wormhole in the universe and cast the monsters into limbo. As shown in the film's Prelude, good lord, I can't talk tonight. Van Helsing had unsuccessfully attempted this 100 years ago in order to defeat his old adversary, Count Dracula. His apprentices then emigrated to the United States to hide the amulet, where it was out of Dracula's immediate reach. Nevertheless, Dracula seeks to obtain the amulet so that he can take control of the world and plunge it into darkness. To this end, he assembles several of his most dangerous and monstrous allies: the Mummy, the Gill Man, the Wolf Man, and in addition, 3 schoolgirls. Those are their actual names. Never mind. 3 schoolgirls who the Count transforms into his vampiric consorts. Good lord, what is up with me tonight? I should have drank more coffee. Dracula then steals a crate from a B-25 Mitchell in flight containing Frankenstein's monster, thus completing his army. However, Frankenstein's monster is reluctant to aid Dracula and wanders into the forest where he encounters Phoebe. Rather than being afraid, she shows him the kindness he has always sought, and they become friends. After Phoebe proves to the Monster Squad that Frankenstein's monster is not evil, he chooses to help the boys instead of Dracula. The Wolfman, when reverting to human form, is a recalcitrant follower of Dracula and has been making calls to the police about the forthcoming carnage, which are dismissed as prank calls. The amulet is buried in a stone room beneath a house that Dracula and the other monsters now occupy, and where Van Helsing's diary was found. The secret room is littered with wards which prevent the monsters from taking it. The Monster Squad break into the house and acquire the amulet and narrowly escape Dracula's grasp. They confer with the Scary German Guy, who informs them that the incantation must be read by a female virgin. As midnight approaches, the squad makes their way to a local cathedral to make their last stand. Meanwhile, Dracula destroys their clubhouse with dynamite, drawing the attention of Sean's father, police detective Dell, who has been charged with investigating the strange occurrences in town, as caused by Dracula's cohorts, but remains quite skeptical about their supernatural causes until he sees Dracula in person. Now, unfortunately, the doors to the cathedral are locked, so the incantation must be read on the stoop, leaving the squad vulnerable. They enlist Patrick's beautiful elder sister, Lisa, to help them, as she is the only virgin they know. However, the incantation fails since Lisa is actually not a virgin anymore. As the monsters close in, the squad deduces that Phoebe must complete the task of opening the portal, and the German Guy attempts to help her read the incantation as the rest of the squad fends off the monsters. In the ensuing battle, Dracula's consorts, the Mummy, the Gill Man, and the Wolf Man, are defeated. Dracula arrives to destroy the amulet when Frankenstein's monster intervenes, impaling him on a wrought iron cross. Phoebe finishes the incantation, opening the portal, which begins to consume the bodies of the monsters. Dracula, still alive, attempts to drag Sean in with it. Sean impales Dracula with a wooden stake as Patrick grabs Sean before he can be sucked into the portal. Then Van Helsing appears, having briefly escaped from limbo, gives a thumbs up to Sean on a job well done, and pulls Dracula to his doom. As Frankenstein's monster is drawn into the portal, Phoebe holds on to him and pleads for him to stay, knowing he doesn't belong to Earth. Frankenstein's monster lets go of Phoebe's hand, but accepts her gift of a stuffed animal to remember her by. The portal then closes, ensuring the world's safety. In the aftermath, the United States Army arrives on the scene, having received a letter from little Eugene earlier on, asking for their help against the monsters. When the confused general fails to make sense of the situation, Sean steps forward and presents the man with his business card, identifying himself and his friends as the Monster Squad.
Yeah, so I want to jump right into it. He actually did some good swagger on the end when he's like, the Monster Squad. And you're like, okay.
This movie is chock full of swagger and bravado by these kids. I mean, they do not lack for confidence most of the time.
Yeah, they do a really good job. I think the only person that I recognize out of this is like one of the bullies. He's the older brother from the Wonder Years. And he's in a ton of terrible movies. But anyways, yeah. So right off though, like, the thing that was funny, like when Van Helsing shows up at the end and gives him a thumbs up, my wife is like sort of watching this movie as I'm watching it, and that's the one thing where she was like, he wouldn't know what that means, and so thumbs up from like 100 years ago,
right? And
so
or more.
That was pretty funny.
It is,
dude.
There's so many laugh out loud moments in this movie.
Right. All right. So
okay,
before we forget,
yes, exactly.
Oh, we both remember it. All right.
Hey.
This is
We're
a
getting
Christmas
closer.
miracle.
It's a Halloween miracle.
It is. So, okay, where were you when you first saw this?
So, I saw this about 7 years ago on my old work movie club, our Sundays of movie marathoning. And
Sunday fun day.
Yeah. So it was probably during a Halloween one year that we, in October, and we were just cranking through all sorts of fun horror movies. So this was one, and I had heard of it as a kid, but I'd never seen it. Obviously, with monsters in it, that was a no-fly movie for sure when we were kids.
Dude, I had never heard of this movie until I literally saw it released on DVD, and I was looking at it, and I was like, Monster Squad. I was like, wait, is this a new movie? And I was checking the date, and I was like, what? This movie's old, from the 80s. I was like, I never heard of this movie. And then I didn't see it for like several more years. And so it was 2 years ago. My wife and I sometimes watch horror movies together on Halloween. And so I was like, let's watch this movie. So we started watching it, and I guess we just weren't in the mood for it because I think it might have been the third movie we were watching or something like that. Anyways, both of us though were like freaking bored, and we were like, want to do something else. So I did not finish this movie actually. And then when we decided to pick this, I thought I was like going to be bored out of my mind. So I had like stuff ready to do like while I was watching the movie, and it totally kept my attention this time. So I think too, though, is I was expecting it to be something that it wasn't. It's a lot cheesier than I was expecting it to be. For some reason, I thought it was going to have like a great backstory with all the monsters, but it's like, no, there's no backstory on any of the monsters.
No.
And I mean, the thing is funny too is like the Hammer films, they couldn't get the copyrights to get the designs from the Hammer films, so all of the monsters look slightly different from the Hammer films. That's why they can't say Creature from the Black Lagoon. They call him Gillman, and so. And then like the Wolfman and Dracula looks different. Frankenstein has bolts on his forehead instead of on his neck, like the Hammer films.
You're right.
And so I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. But Stan Winston did the special effects in this movie. There's a chalk one up for Stan Winston. Like, he's really good with what he does with creature effects.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. This movie, yes, it's kind of corny, but it's totally an homage to these original monster movies, which are a bit campy and cheesy, and that's totally what the nod is. It's not that this was a poorly made movie or bad effects, or I know there was one critique where they're like, this is like they were using the cheap monster masks from a cheap Halloween store, and it's like, well, yeah, that was kind of the point, because they're copying. They're copying these old movies, and they're not supposed to look absolutely perfect like some absolutely scary Dracula or Wolfman or
Which is kind of funny because the Wolfman was actually modeled after Stan Winston, so apparently that's kind of what he looks like. But the only one I thought actually that looked really good was Gilman, which you like barely see him. He's like barely in the movie. And so the thing I think is hilarious is when they're like, okay, so Wolfman, like the coolest scene in the movie is when the dad, like, I think it's the dad, he puts the dynamite stick in the Wolfman's pants and like kicks him out the window and he just freaking blows up. And
right.
it's just like boom, and you're
blows
like,
him in half. Right.
Like, and you're just like, oh dang, like, okay, that's pretty freaking
happened.
Cool. Yeah.
Right.
And because Aubrey and I, we were talking, we were like, well, I guess if you like decapitated the Wolfman, then like he'd be dead. But then that next scene is like, oh nope, he comes back together and then he keeps going. And I was like, I guess that answers that.
Right.
But then the thing that's funny is it takes forever to kill the Wolfman. They finally kill him. And then like Gilman, one shotgun blast to the chest and he's down.
Right.
He's just like, this is like big imposing guy. And then it's just like,
right.
boom.
He's like this, probably the scariest looking, I mean, kind of the scariest looking one, really, like the face and everything.
Right.
And just, one blast and he's done. And Dynamite couldn't even take out the Wolfman. So.
Right, because he's just, it's so funny because the
funny
Gilman,
on so many levels.
So yeah, he's just like wrecking the police guys, which is crazy. They're like not shooting him. They're all like trying to take him down. And
right.
Which, by the way, this was shot in the same town area that Back to the Future was shot. So that clock in the back.
I wondered about that because it looks, I mean, it's the town square. It looks exactly.
It is. It's the town square. It would have been cool if like they actually had a DeLorean in the background in one scene, but
right.
they didn't. But yeah, but I was like, oh, that's cool. But the thing that's funny too is actually dang it, I just blanked on his name. Who's the guy who plays Abe Sapien from Hellboy? It's Doug something.
Yeah. Good old Dougie Doug. He's awesome. Doug.
So anyways, this is the first movie that he actually played a character. So he was Gilman, and that is not true. Wow. Sorry. I was looking up stuff. He's not even in this movie.
No, I was just going to IMDb him. Like, wait a minute. I don't think that's right.
Sorry. No, he's in Hocus Pocus. That was something else that I was studying. So, never mind. Hocus Pocus. Check that out. We'll get to that movie next year.
Right.
So
that would have been cool because he's Tom Woodruff Jr. was the guy that did Gilman.
That's what it was, yeah. So this is his first movie playing as a creature feature type of character, and so he couldn't see very well in the suit. And so there's one part where he like swings around and he's fighting off the police, and he knocked out one of the stunt guys by accident. So like he literally turned him around and clipped him right in the face, and the guy like dropped to the ground and was like out for like 3 seconds. And they were like, "Just keep rolling," and so. So I guess that's in the movie. I didn't quite see it, but I think, no. So there's one part where he's flailing around. You see one of the cops just drop, and that was the stunt guy. I forgot about that, but that was pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's as far as the Gilman goes, though. I did think of when I was reading some of the little facts about the movie, and they were talking about him and doing that was his first time doing the creature acting and whatnot. I was thinking about, darn it, I forgot to look him up. That's what I meant to do. Doug, what's his face?
I'm going to look that up right now. We got to give this guy props. He is so good.
He is amazing. The Shape of Water, Pan's Labyrinth.
Doug Jones.
He's Doug Jones. He's in the new Star Trek series.
Oh, is he? I didn't know that.
CBS, All Access, whatever it is. Yeah. The guy's phenomenal. His body movement is just out of this world. Which is why he always gets these alien type roles, because he's a swimmer, and I guess he's like double jointed everywhere or something. He's just absolutely fluid. And he's super lean too. He's really thin, so he can play a lot of really interesting characters. Right, but he's a good actor too. So it's not just he's not just like nothing against Andre the Giant, but I mean Andre the Giant was a big huge dude, so he played big huge dude roles, and that's why we loved him. Great actor. He was funny. Right. But yeah, Doug Jones though is like a legit actor for sure. Yeah, he definitely is. That was a great rabbit trail that I went on. So yeah, anyways, Doug Jones is in Hocus Pocus. That's his first role. So anyway, back to the Monster Squad.
So yeah, let me go ahead and get back to my notes here. Let's see. Oh, this thing that's kind of cool is the two main kids. Well, I guess they're, it's kind of funny. So the main kid, Andre Gower, his best friend actually in real life at the time was Robbie Kiger. I think that's how you say his name. So he actually was like, "Hey, can I have my best friend play my best friend in this movie?" And they were like,
Right.
"Sure." I don't know what the story is besides that, but yeah. So that was his best friend in real life. So that was pretty cool.
That is cool. You definitely get that's real. It's not just on screen. Hey, those guys look like they're best friends. It's like, oh, they are best friends. So yeah, that was
right.
It was kind of like the reverse of when we were doing Sandlot and we were talking about how the director had the Scotty and other dude Benny actually come and work together for over a month before the rest of the kids cast showed up, and they actually thought they were best friends because they'd spent so much time together and got to know each other. So you kind of got that
That's
effect,
awesome.
but they were actually just friends that got to be on the movie together.
Yeah, that is pretty legit. I mean, how cool would that be? Like, your kids, and then you're making a movie that basically is the equivalency of being Marvel fans in a new movie. Like, if you grew up watching monster films, like, you are a huge fan of all these movies. And Shane Black and Fred Dekker were both big fans of these movies. So that's where, like, the first time I watched it, I didn't know what to expect, and it was so fast moving that I was like, "Where's the story? Where's the heart?" It's like Nacho Libre. Where's the spices? And where's the flavor? And and so with that though, the second time that I was watching it though, I just was like, I'm just gonna watch this for what it is, and it's a fast moving, fun movie that doesn't take itself seriously, and it's not trying to.
Not at all.
And
No, that's it right there. It's not trying to take itself seriously, and I think if you're looking at it with a very critical eye, like I think that the critics were at the time, and of course they were. I mean, that's what you get. I mean, you see the schlockiness of it and the cheesiness, and you're thinking,
Right.
oh, this is just a cheap, terrible movie, and you completely miss the point that it's supposed to just be fun, total, homage to these old movies. And then the thing that I love about it is that, like the Goonies, it's just this era of, and I guess it spilled into the 90s, but when you were a kid, I mean, the world just seemed to be a safer place. You could run around. You and your friends could ride your bike miles from home, and your parents were cool with it, and you just showed up, basically the old saying was, come home when the streetlights come on.
Right.
I mean, and I wouldn't do that with my kids these days. There ain't no way. And I live in a pretty safe, I'd say very safe neighborhood. There's no way I would just be like, yeah, go ahead and disappear for
6
4 or 5 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
for
I know
real.
when I was a kid, I got to do that, and that it's just times are different. So, anyways, it takes me back because that's kind of part of the magic of this movie is these group of kids that just get to run around and have all these adventures, and and it was a believable thing. And you really got to kind of do that. So you see that in the Goonies, which is another great adventure kind of movie, and it's got that same vibe here, which is very nostalgic, and it's a very, very cool thing to experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of funny too, like all of the posters that they had inside their treehouse. I mean, they had the Terror, they had Zombie, they had what else did they have? They had a bunch of different posters on there. They had Godzilla, and like I thought that was pretty funny because a lot of those movies are like pretty intense. But honestly, the thing I love too is they made a joke. I had to look it up to see, like, that didn't make sense. But he's like, I'm going to go see Groundhog Day Part 12.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I was like, freaking Groundhog Day with Bill Murray? I was like,
I know, that's what I thought too first.
Right. And so I looked it up, and they were like, oh, because at the time, they were making horror movies about almost every holiday. And that was like one of the only ones where they didn't. So, because like even like, shoot, I forgot. There's a movie that's like Bloody Valentine's Day or something like that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And My Bloody Valentine. And so that's why they said Groundhog Day Part 12 was like nobody had that one yet. So that was the joke.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's freaking funny. Like that makes sense. That goes along with Shane Black's type of humor if you've seen his movies. And so
well, I just looked up, I just Googled Groundhog Day, the movie. That came out in 93. So this is absolutely a hilarious joke because there was no, obviously you say Groundhog Day now, if you're at least as old as we are, you're thinking, Bill Murray's comedy. But this movie came out, a good 6 years before? Is that what it was?
I guess so, yeah.
So
that's pretty awesome.
87, yeah. So yeah. Anyways, that was super hilarious.
So let's get into They've got a ton of references to different horror movies in here. Like it's loaded, so it's Easter
Right.
eggs galore.
Galore.
The one galore. That's the second Princess Bride reference today. Anyways, the one that I really like though is, have you seen the original Frankenstein movie?
I feel like I have. I've seen at least bits and pieces of it. There was like a book on movie monsters at the library that I used to look at when I was a kid, so I know I've seen lots of still shots from it for sure.
Right.
I feel like I've seen it, but I can't say for sure.
I just bought it randomly because I'd never seen it, and I read the book, and I was like, okay, I need to watch this. This is like a
Is
classic
that Boris
film.
Karloff?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're watching it, and there's one scene in the movie that's it's very different than the book. And so one scene though is the Frankenstein. He's just rambling around trying to figure out life, and so then he finds this little girl next to the pond, which is like Phoebe in this movie.
Right.
And so he's playing with her, and he drowns her by accident because he doesn't understand that like she can die and different stuff. And so
Right.
he gets super distraught about that he killed this little girl by accident. So he goes on like a rampage, and so that's part of the reason people don't like Frankenstein, or the Frankenstein's monster, because technically they even talk about that. That's not Frankenstein. That's Frankenstein's monster.
Right.
And so in this movie, though, instead of him killing Phoebe, like they become best friends. And so like that's a little like the nod to that movie, which is pretty awesome.
Right. And that specific scene too, which is cool. And it's just very sweet. Their little relationship is adorable.
Right. And it's funny seeing Tom Noonan in this role. Every time I've seen him in like almost every other movie, he's always like a serial killer or somebody weird. And in this movie, he's like the one person who's awesome, which I thought it was a weird choice that they had him go into the void as well at the end. I totally thought they were going to pull like a Harry and the Hendersons or something, like all those 90 movies where he was just going to like live with the family from then on. And I think that would have honestly been a weirder, cheesier, better version instead of him going into the void because of his connection with the little girl.
Right.
And did they specifically say it has to be a female virgin in this movie?
So I was trying to remember that too, because I saw in one of the little trivia things, they didn't say, it just said virgin.
That's what I thought.
I think they were just, you could see it in their body language and everything. They're just going on the assumption, virgins means female.
Right.
Even though that's
bunch of sexist.
Right. It's not technically the definition of the word. So yeah, any of those boys could have done it.
That's why they do that in Hocus Pocus. Like they don't, like that's like one of the jokes is like virgins are guys too. And so like that's I think that's what they do in that. Anyways, and so that's why I was like that they missed a great joke. That would have been hilarious if like like the like one of the boys has to read it instead. And I thought that was a little weird that they had Phoebe do that. I was just kind of like, she's like a freaking 5-year-old. This kind of awkward situation. But anyways.
Well, speaking of that, there is a lot of sexual humor in this movie that as junior high boys, let's be real. There's a lot. You talk about stuff you don't understand, and there's a lot of that. And then also I always forget how PG-13 movies in the 80s and even the early 90s just had way more kind of overtly sexual jokes and language and whatnot than you see in PG-13 movies today that are kind of aimed at kids. There's a lot less. I'd say they're more violent now than they were back then, but the language and the subject, the dialogue subject matter is way more crass. They're throwing around a lot of... Huh?
Are you talking about PG or PG-13?
PG-13.
Oh.
It's PG-13, right?
Yeah, it's rated PG-13. But I wonder if they back rated it, though. When did this movie...
that could be.
Because,
it came out in 87.
Yeah, because I thought Red Dawn was the first PG-13 movie because of Temple of Doom. And there's a couple other movies that came out around the same time. And that's when Steven Spielberg was like really pushing for them to have another rating because he got so much flack on Temple of Doom being like a super violent movie for kids. Because it is. It's freaking violent.
Sure.
And I love it. But
I know. No, but I think you're right. But that's true because I remember watching, what was it? Harry and the Hendersons, and I think that's PG.
Yeah.
But they drop a fair amount of like strong language in it for a PG movie, and like PG movies today don't have any language in it for the most part. I don't even think they say hell or anything like that.
They'll say that in PG movies, but PG movies in the 80s basically meant this could be G or PG-13, like almost R. Like you didn't know what you were getting. Like 16 Candles has like full on nudity in it, and so this movie though doesn't hold back. They definitely have a fair amount of sexual stuff in it,
but it's not like, I don't think it has anything to do with this movie in particular. I just think it's just movies in that time period.
Absolutely,
because even like there's a lot of homophobic.
I noticed that
slurs, like they say some stuff that would not fly today at all. I mean, I kind of took me back a little bit. It's like, you can't say that. Oh, well, but I mean,
I covered my dog's ears.
It's like when I was a kid and we played Smear the Queer. I didn't even know what a queer was for the longest time, and then you're like, I think Mom finally was like, yeah, it's a homosexual. And you're like,
my gosh. I didn't even figure that out. I forgot about that.
That's pretty hateful.
Yeah, you're like, that's not good. That's totally yeah. So yeah, I actually had that in my notes. I was like, within the first 15 minutes, I was like, there's a bunch of gay slurs in this movie.
Right.
And the thing is though, unfortunately, that was totally normal. Like
it was acceptable. I'm sure I said those words too when I was a kid, not knowing what it meant, and that's just how it was. So I mean, some of that stuff is definitely a little bit dated, obviously, language-wise. But
you have to watch. That's the thing too with any movie that is older. You have to watch it with the context of when it was released, because you can't judge older movies. Well, that's the conversation I was having with a friend of mine. I'm trying to think. There's a movie that's called. I'm going to cut this out. I'm trying to think. What's the name of that movie? Okay. So there's a movie that's called Birth of a Nation, which came out in 1915. And that movie that's like the first real movie that had 3 reels. It was long. It was super epic. And in that movie, the Ku Klux Klan are the good guys. And
are the heroes, right?
They're the heroes. And so that
and the black people are the villains.
Yeah.
And they're not even black people. They're white people in blackface.
Exactly. And so
one of the most racist pop culture movies ever.
It's super racist. And the president at that time, Woodrow Wilson, was like, hey, this movie is such a good American film. And so the thing is, though, that movie, this is the context, though, it's that movie was a breakthrough point in cinema history. That movie did so many different things that had never done before. But it's extremely racist. So, do we throw that film away because of that? So that's the ongoing conversation with that. So that's a terrible example to use, I guess.
Well, no, but it's not. It's extreme, but it's true. I mean, I feel like as far as film history goes, it's definitely worth watching. I mean, you watch it with the eye of, those things are wrong, obviously, and you're not celebrating what's going on in that movie, in that story, but I mean, it is history, and obviously you also want to pay attention so that we don't inadvertently do it again. I mean, that's that whole saying of, the past is doomed to repeat itself. So if you erase it, I totally butchered that saying, but yeah, if you erase history, you're gonna repeat it,
right?
Unless you keep reminding yourself what happened in history. So
yeah,
that is
so watching this movie,
a sad part of film history. It is. Yeah, like you said, it was a breakthrough, but it's sad that was the subject matter.
That was the subject matter
movie,
which today doesn't fly, and so which is kind of why that's exactly why they did that movie about Nate Turner, and they named the movie Birth of the Nation. They did that on purpose to take back that name, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So regarding with this movie, the gay slurs in this movie they don't fly, but at the same time, that wasn't
that was common language.
Unfortunately, that was common language.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So it did surprise me, though.
Yeah, I know. But bringing it back around to what you said earlier, as far as this movie it's full of monster stuff. It's everywhere you look. Almost every scene, it's either the way the scene is shot. It's a tribute to a famous scene in another movie. There's one of the kids is wearing a Stephen King Rules T-shirt, which I would love to get that shirt.
I know. I saw that. I was like, I need that shirt.
I love that. I know. And there's just every little thing. I mean, they don't ever mention Stephen King, but he was, especially in the 80s. I mean, that guy was.
Oh, he's on fire.
He's still the king as far as horror goes in my book, but back then, especially, there was nobody bigger than Stephen King in the horror literature genre, or even his movies. I mean, the movies were were massive back then. So that was very cool.
Yeah. No, that was, and also I wrote down too, another thing was there's a guy that is wearing, looks like a Freddy Krueger shirt, like the same color, same styles. I don't think that was an accident.
I would be surprised if it was an accident. Yeah, because there's so many nods. I mean, tons of nods to, famous stuff.
Yeah.
Famous monster stuff.
I thought that was awesome. Also too, like the part when somebody calls asking about the Van Helsing story, and they're like Alucard called or whatever, and he's got that written on there, and he looks down and he's like writing it out, and then he writes the name backwards, and it's actually Dracula backwards. I was like, oh, I actually knew that from Castlevania watching that show.
Nice.
And so I was like, oh, that's pretty cool though. They have that little thing in there. Obviously they came up. Well, actually, no, Castlevania, never mind, was around at that time on the original Nintendo. So
maybe they tied that in there too.
That'd be cool if they did. The thing I love too is like one of the first scenes when Dracula comes back is the blatant bats on strings behind him, and they're like, geek,
yes,
geek, geek. And I was like, oh, that's so awesome. And then, yeah. Also too, that's another throwback. So they have armadillos instead of rats, and that's a throwback to the original movie. They didn't have rats; they had armadillos because that's all they could afford. So they did that on purpose in this movie.
Right, because I remember seeing that. And I'm like, what the heck? There's no armadillos in Transylvania. Not realizing that that's why that was there. I mean, it's so brilliant. Such a cool tip of the hat,
And so the thing that got me too is I was looking this up, and so the rat squeaks was actually guinea pig squeaks, which I had a guinea pig when I was a little kid, and I was like, oh, that makes sense because rats don't make a ton of noise, and so guinea pigs are super noisy though. So that was that I was like, oh, that's funny. So then anytime the rats or armadillos were squeaking, I was like, oh, that brings me back. That's awesome.
Right.
They
super
also.
Cool.
Dude, so this movie, they cut 13 minutes out of this movie because the producers were like, no, it has to be 90 minutes because we have to show this as many times as we can in theaters, which is like why Avengers, people were like concerned that it was 3 hours long, that like, could we actually make our money? Obviously they could.
Not a problem, folks.
Right.
Not a problem.
So they cut out 13 minutes. There's like tons of deleted scenes in this apparently, which is pretty crazy.
Do you own this one?
I don't actually. No, I had to rent this movie.
Yeah, me too. I would buy this one for sure. We're getting ahead of ourselves though.
We certainly are. Well, we're not too far ahead. It's almost
We're getting close there. Okay. Oh, one thing I was gonna say, and we're kind of referencing it inadvertently, but the comedic editing of this movie, is so good.
Yes,
it's I feel it's really good, and that's part of the pacing too, because it doesn't drag. I mean, it moves right along. It's definitely, a great kids movie in that regard. I say that, not necessarily in regard to the subject matter, because it did kind of take me back on like the amount of sexual dialogue and the language and whatnot.
Yeah, they had no problem in the 80s of like letting the kids just swear up a storm.
Right. And
I thought the 90s were bad as a kid, and like looking back, Sandlot has like almost no swearing in it, and I thought that was like a horrible film when I was a little kid. That's what I heard.
There's so many bad words in it.
So many rebellious children. And so
and it's like not even close to this movie.
No, this movie they're like, but so. Now, real quick, I love that they have a reference to the Hardy Boys in this, because you and me grew up reading the Hardy Boys. That's like some of the books we were allowed to read, and I was like, that's what I freaking loved it, because you never talk about the Hardy Boys in movies,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think kids these days really know about them at all anymore. I mean, maybe they've revised them into some kind of modern thing, but
yeah, they tried with Nancy Drew multiple times, but
yeah, I think actually there is a whole new series of Nancy Drew books.
Hey.
Yeah, our Trinity's brother's daughter loves them, but they're all new stories, but it's Nancy Drew, but it's at that, I don't know, 5 to 7 year old age group, something like that. Yeah, but she loves them. Apparently they're good reading if you're that age.
Hey, there you go. So we give you listeners all kinds of great tips on 5 to 7 year olds. Nancy Drew.
Check out the new Nancy Drew series.
Sponsored by? No.
No one.
Right? You think we're getting paid?
Right.
Anyway.
Well, I was going to point out this movie's funny because there are elements of, I feel it being kind of I feel like there's points where it does very much feel like a cheap knockoff of Goonies, and not a lot, but like the kid Horace. They call him Fat Kid.
I know.
What kind of a nickname is that?
I know.
That's
I
terrible.
said that to my wife. I was like, what kind of, I was like, at least they call him Chunk in the Goonies. You know,
That's what I mean. I mean, that's a nickname. Fat Kid?
I've never called or heard anybody called. I've heard like Fatty or like all kinds of other things. Fat Kid. That's the best you could do. Like,
that's what I mean. It's like there was like they completely just drew a blank, zero imagination on that.
I mean, maybe they're trying to do that to point out like how cruel that is. So I don't think so. Though. I think that was just lazy writing.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like he should have had a cool nickname. Scary German Guy. That was the other one. It was kind of like,
Actually, I like that because I like the line.
And I agree. I came back around eventually. I was like, I get it. That kind of works with the, who his character was and everything. And as kids, how would you see him? He's the scary German guy.
He's the unknown foreigner. And as a little kid, when you don't know stuff, you're afraid.
Right.
But then like they bring it around where he's like the super sweet guy and he's like, do you need more pie? And then freaking fat
and
kid Horace
helps them save the day. He's
detrimental to the plot. Without him, we'd be ruled by Dracula right now. It would be the forever night. Exactly,
because they wouldn't know how to read German.
Right. And yeah, but like that was another thing too. My wife and I like too, where he's like, I know monsters, and he closes the door, and it's a one-shot scene, and you see his tattoo from Auschwitz, and you're like, oh snap! Like, this dude's like legit, like. Which is kind of confusing. Like, why does he have the tattoo? So he must have been a Jewish German. But anyways.
Well, yeah, no, he is. Exactly. But
did they address that in the movie? I don't remember if they did.
No, they never do. But it's a very serious little drop to, I think that was obviously aimed at adults. Because if you're a kid, you have no idea. You're like, oh, numbers on his arm. Okay. But absolutely as an adult, you're like, oh, monsters.
Yeah. You're like, oh, dude. Yeah. And I thought that was great.
Yeah. It was very cool. It was, and it automatically, because at first you're like, I don't know, this guy seems kind of creepy. And then as soon as you see that, you're just instant sympathy and you're like, wow, this guy's seen some stuff.
That's true. That's a good point. So my favorite line out of this movie is when Phoebe just keeps bugging the main guy and he's trying to talk and then he finally turns to her and he's like, Phoebe, handle life. And then like moves on. Like, even though my wife and I didn't finish this movie the first time we watched it, we literally quote that one line every now and then. We'll be like, Aubrey, handle life, or Jeremy, handle life. And like start busting up because it's just funny, that line.
Yeah.
So
there was a lot of good one-liners in this movie for sure.
There is. Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing, too, I want to talk about is Dracula. So Dracula is the only guy in this movie, I feel, that like plays it straight, where he's like straight up villain. He is not funny. Yeah. He is actually the villain. Because even the Wolfman's like kind of goofy and the whole like joke around, like, he's got his wolf dork and like, Wolfman's got nards and all this stuff, and so like just... all that's kind of played for laughs, and then Dracula though.
Same with the Mummy.
Right. Oh yeah, the Mummy scene was awesome when they like freaking like tie him to the tree and then they're driving off and he freaking unravels. I was just like, that's so funny.
They tie part of the wrapping to the arrow, shoot that to the tree, and
yeah. Oh man, I loved it. I thought that was so funny when I saw that. I was like, that's the smart thinking. That's the smart screenplay right there. How do we get rid of the Mummy?
Because to me, that's kind of like something a kid would think of. It's like, oh, we'll just unravel them like toilet paper, Right.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
So the thing that was interesting, too, is like I got a little bit of information here, is that in 2006, Wizard Magazine made a list of the 100 greatest villains of all time. And Dracula from this movie made number 30 on the list. And it was this performance that Duncan Rager actually did over Christopher Lee, over Bela Lugosi. Like, this was the one that actually everybody over Frank Langella. How do you say his name? Langella. Anyways, this was the one that was the most menacing. And I agree, because like the scene where Dracula is like kind of faces off his dad the first time, he literally just like, his dad tries to shoot him and he just looks at him and then he's like, oh, I'm needed elsewhere. Like, he doesn't care about the dad. Like, he's nothing to him. So he's just like, I'm just going to like, he doesn't even try, because like in other movies he'd be like, I'm going to kill you, but he's like, no, you don't even matter to me, so I'm just gonna, you're an ant.
You're not worth the effort to try to take the time to kill you. He's that above humans, which is pretty menacing. Did you see the fact about the scene when he's facing off with Phoebe at the end of the movie?
Oh,
and
yeah.
he grabs her. So apparently, for the entirety of this movie, the actress that played Phoebe, the little 5-year-old girl, she was terrified of Dracula when he had his red contacts in and the fangs. So they never had any of the scenes with her. He never had them in until the very last scene where she has to scream when she sees him, or he's trying to strangle her, or however the scene went. And at that point, he had that contacts in, and the fangs, opens his eyes, mouth opens and the fangs, and her screaming is her actual scream of fear, legit terror. Which, yes, kind of brilliant, and I also think that's kind of a dick move to do that to a little kid. I mean, that's nightmare material for a long time.
Well, that's like, yes, it is. Yeah, I mean, that's not as bad, but that's like Natalie Portman from The Professional, where they like sprayed this, like, they were like, can you cry on command? And she's like, no, 'cause she's like 10 in that movie. And they sprayed this like filmy stuff in her eyes that made her eyes hurt and like basically cry. And so then after that, she was like, I can cry on command. And I was just like,
just don't spray me in the eyes with that stuff.
I was like, dang, man, that's crazy. But yeah, so that was pretty awesome. We're running out of time here on this one. So
yep.
Do you have anything else you want to comment? I could actually talk about this movie for there's a lot to talk about this movie.
It's really fun. I mean, just the last thing I put in my notes is so fun. Because it is. I mean, it's just,
yeah.
Every little scene has something that's either nostalgic. It's a cool nod to, I say nostalgic as in the 80s or being a kid. And then there's the, all the nods and to monsters and monster culture, horror culture. And then plus just some really fun, acting. It's just top to bottom. I think it's a hidden gem that I wish, and I think it has over the last, like you said, when the Blu-ray came out. I think it finally opened the door, because that's probably about the time that I saw it.
Yeah.
Come to think of it, or at least when it came out on DVD. So that I think it's going to start to become more and more popular of a thing.
I think so too. I think it's finally made its way into, like, this is one of those classic Halloween movies you watch, and it took 30 years for it to finally become that. That's a long time. That's like basically, as an artist, you died before you ever saw your stuff become super famous. Like, right. So so jumping into final verdicts. Josh, do you think this movie hit the mark when it came out?
I would have to say no, because considering they pulled it from theaters in 2 weeks, and then whenever they released it on VHS, I'm sure. But I mean, I think the studio wrote this off as a complete dud. Yeah, it is one release on VHS, and then it was like 15 years later they released it on DVD, and then that's when it started tracking Steam. But like, I give it an F. This movie bombed hard. Yeah, I was thinking a D at first, but that's too generous. That's me wanting the movie to have been accepted back then. But no, it was a straight F, I think, when it came out. Yeah. Just people not realizing what they were seeing. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder if some of that, like, I haven't seen, I didn't pull up on YouTube the trailer for the movie, but I'm wondering how it was marketed. If it really had a strong Goonies vibe, because it's Goonies-esque, but it's really not the Goonies as far as the monsters and the on purpose kind of cheesiness. I think that it's just, the reason they say it's the Goonies is because it's a group of kids, but on an adventure doing crazy stuff. But they're not even on an adventure more. They're just like, it's more about the monsters. It takes a long time for this movie to set up the story, and then the story is pretty simple. It's like, get the amulet and banish them. And like the Goonies is like consistently an adventure, like moving on, and there's people chasing them and stuff. So I don't even think this movie is too Goonies-ish, but I agree. I'm really interested. I didn't look into that to see, what was the marketing aspects of this film. That would be interesting. Right. But I agree with you. I think then it was definitely an F. So what do you think about now? How about its relevance now? What do you say? I'd give it a S. This is harder than so I'm going to give it a C, because I don't know anybody actually that likes this movie. And
I've just seen like a little bit more information about it coming out over time. I know it's gaining popularity because the 80s are so hot. The 80s are so hot right now. And so that Hansel. And so yeah, I definitely think it's gaining steam, and it's definitely becoming a Halloween. It's a Halloween cult classic. It's not a Halloween classic yet. So I give it a C.
Right.
What about you?
I give it a B just because I know people, some of my friends in Sacramento.
Yeah.
My friends Denise and Kyle, they were big on, oh, this is a great movie, you're gonna love it, and that's why we watched it with our little movie club back in the day. So, and there was several people actually in that little group that knew about it, and then I was even talking to some friends here at work, and they were aware of it, and they're like, oh yeah, I got to see that movie. So I would give it a B.
Cool.
Probably somewhere between there.
Yeah. All right. Personal enjoyment, Josh. How did you like this movie?
I give it a B, even a B+.
B+.
Yeah, I think it was fun.
There you go. I think I'm going to give it a C+ because
Cool.
I liked it, actually. I enjoyed it this time. It's fun.
Considering you went from not finishing it to actually enjoying it, I mean, that's a pretty big... You might like it even more next time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It could be. It could be one of those movies. Like, I definitely... I'd watch this again for sure. So it's not a bad movie. It definitely hits the mark in what it was trying to go for. I think just people just didn't want that at the time, or I don't know,
Sure.
marketed bad. Could be a John Carter of marketing scheme where it was like marketed horribly. So,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. All right. Is it a midnight watch?
For me, it is. I think if this, there's just a lot of parts in this movie. If it came on, I'd want to finish it off. So,
Hey,
that's a yes from me, Jeremy.
good. I'm glad you liked it. I was gonna say, because I was like, I feel like it is a midnight watch. It's not a midnight watch for me, but I can totally see though that it would be a midnight watch for other people though.
Yeah.
Like it's got that feel. It's got.
We just
need.
proved your point. There you go. You're welcome.
That's what I'm talking about. Well, let's see. That wraps up today's episode, guys. If you want to check out the movie, it's out there. No, I rented it on Amazon. What about you?
I did as well, actually.
Nice. $4. It would totally worth it.
Yeah, it was worth $4. And some of these movies we've rented, and it's like, it was cool, but I don't think it was worth $4.
Right. Even though I will say I don't think we've reviewed a movie yet that is like, I wish I had that time back. So.
No, and let's be honest, folks. I don't know that we're really ever going to review movies like that because
we don't want to waste our time.
Kind of. There's just a lot of movies that we love, and that's what we want to talk about are the movies we love. And if I say, like in our tagline, we've said love to hate, it's got to be that it's so bad it's good kind of a way, I guess.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, one of us, unless we go in blind, I know we have a couple movies set up that neither of us have seen that we're going to go in blind and watch. That's different. But
right.
So that's going to be pretty fun. Special thanks to our sound producer, Jake Colin. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you shared with your friends or anyone you think, friends or family, anyone or enemies, and anyone you think that would like it.
Absolutely. Please subscribe to the podcast if you listen on, actually any platform. There's a subscribe button you can hit. So please do that. We'd love a 5-star rating or so on Apple Podcast. We're on Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcast. You name it, we're probably there. And we're on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram. We got a pretty happening Instagram page.
Oh, yeah.
Right now. I don't know. I think we're putting up some fun stuff. If you like fun artwork having to do with these movies, I tend to put a lot of that up. So, and if you want to contact us with the old email, hit us up at themidnightwatchpodcast@gmail.com.
That's right. So yeah, we are killing it on Apple. Actually, we need more people to review. So if you like this, like seriously though, we really appreciate it though. If you could leave us a review on Apple, that's like the main place that we get reviews and we get ratings. So it really actually means a lot to us if you guys would just rate it or leave us a review. That'd be fantastic. So thank you guys so much. You have an awesome week, and as always, keep up the watch.